Black Flag Activity Report, Navajo David. This is another one I was hesitant on sharing with you guys. If you're squeamish, don't watch this one. Also understand that this type of work can get violent. It's never our intention for that to be the case, but sometimes it's out of our control. We get hired to apprehend people, and they don't always let that happen or come willingly. This was one of those situations. David had been out of bond out of Mesa, Arizona. His original charges were drunk and disorderly and assault on an officer. One day, while out on bond, we got the call that David had missed court and went warrant. Let's start here. Being out on bond is a privilege. You could be sitting your time out going through your court case in a jail cell. People who are out on bond and can't go to their court dates is something I cannot understand. A lot of people skip on their sentencing, and that at least makes sense. But not going to court and ending up warrant is something that is in many cases totally avoidable. Bondsmen typically pay attention to court minutes as they are in some sense responsible for the people they bond out. So not going to court is a deal breaker and will, for sure, get you put back in jail. Like I said, being out on bond is a privilege. So if you're out, at the very least, go to court. I mean, come on, man. David was a tribal member of the Navajo Nation, a well-known Native American tribe in northern Arizona. As with many Native Americans, and I mean this in a factual and caring way, he was a very large human being, standing at 6'4" and weighing over 300 pounds. David was also known to be confrontational with not just authority figures, but when he was drinking, he would fight anything and anyone. We had heard he tried to fight an ambulance a few years before he landed on bond with his current bondsman. Not the EMTs that showed up at the bar he was at, but the actual ambulance itself. Yeah. My partner at the time had just left the police force in Phoenix. Feeling extra froggy that night and really not knowing what we were getting into, we geared up and headed out. We drove to David's apartment complex that was in a dicey part of Mesa, Arizona. Apartment complexes can be dangerous, especially at night when there are more people that are living there or home. People live in close proximity to each other, and groups can gather quickly, creating mob mentality and putting law enforcement or arresting agents at risk. When we arrived at the complex, we parked our vehicle in the parking lot after driving by the unit. When we drove by, we couldn't really see the front door and just decided to walk up and see what was going on. Walking past the middle units, we started to get close to the unit David and his girlfriend were in, and when we rounded the corner of the patio area, we came into full view. We were fully exposed. Thinking today would be just like any other recovery, we pushed ahead and walked into full sight. When we walked around the corner, we came face to face with David and his two friends who were sitting on the patio with him. David's girlfriend was on the patio with them and was cooking on the barbecue with her back turned to us. David had a bottle of wild turkey in one hand and a red sippy cup in the other. David and me made eye contact, and almost instantaneously he stood up and said, "Fuck you, dog." Seeing the size of him was another thing. David was big, like tree trunk big. But I'm not a small guy myself, and we didn't really have time to size each other up. It was go time. My partner and I rushed the area, and David's friend, seemingly knowing what was about to happen, parted ways. One jumped over the handrails and beat feet, and the other one ran inside. This was an issue because we didn't know if he was going to grab a weapon or just trying to get away from the chaos that was about to unfold. Seeing us rush in, David turned to go inside. But I caught him from behind and bear hugged him to keep him from going in the unit. David continued to walk slowly towards the door and said, "Why are you holding me?" I was surprised he was able to drag me like that because with my kid on and gear on, I'm pushing 300 pounds. We came crashing down, causing my partner, who was on his back, to fall over the railing and outside the patio area. It was a good thing we were on the first floor. When I had bear hugged David, I wrapped a bottle of wild turkey in my grips of my hands, and after falling to the ground, the bottle broke under David, cutting my right hand and wrist. I could feel the glass crunching and grinding around into my wrist as David tried to get up. I didn't have time to worry about my hand and wrist, which was for sure, without a doubt, cut and bleeding. David got to one of his knees and he made that space, so I pulled my arm out and readjusted to get an underhook on the other hand that had been holding the bottle. I didn't want him to do two things: stand up or be able to use the broken bottleneck as a weapon against my partner and I. When he started to get up on his other knee, I was able to get the underhook I had on him and turn him to his side. I was now able to see my wrist and hand, which was gushing large amounts of warm, syrupy blood all over the place. If you've ever cut yourself and then tried to use your hand, you know it slips all over the place. Grabbing things becomes a lot more difficult. I would compare it to covering your arms with a lot of dish soap or olive oil and then trying to use dexterity. Fine motor skills go out the window at this point. David started punching me in the face. I ducked my head into his chest and returned the favor and landed a right across the bridge of his nose. It made a loud slapping sound as David had a very big nose. Luckily, I didn't need fine motor skills to throw a punch. After breaking David's nose, he was now bleeding all over too. My partner made it back into the patio area and mounted David's legs, pinching them together with his. I was able to get into S-mount. Jiu-jitsu guys and wrestlers know what this is. I was up towards his head and trying to wrap up his hands because he was still grabbing, pulling, elbowing, and punching everything he could, randomly yelling, "I'll kill you, motherfucker," in a voice that sounded quite convincing. David's girlfriend was screaming too, things like, "Someone help, they are killing him," and "David, bite him." At one point, she grabbed my partner's vest and he turned and sprayed her in the face with pepper spray. She ran off the patio holding her face and yelling. The whole time, I was waiting for his friend to come back out of the unit and either shoot us or hit us with a bat, a club, a piece of wood, whatever. I was really surprised and happy he didn't come back. I now had David's head pinched between my legs and in some weird position that's really truly hard to describe. I was just trying to keep him from being able to hit me again with his very large meat hook hands. At one point, he took his girlfriend's advice and bit me right on the inside of my left thigh. I yelled, "You son of a bitch!" and pushed up on his broken nose, crunching it around and getting him to let me go. My partner looked at me and said, "Lift your leg, I'm going to spray him." I lifted my leg and he sprayed David in the face with pepper gel, getting it all over David and the crotch area of my pants that I was wearing. David rubbed his face back and forth all over my groin and ass. It was a very alarming feeling to say the least. I kept thinking, he's going to bite my balls. He's going to bite my balls. Thank God he didn't. My partner had already put cuffs on one of his hands and I was able to move off of this weird S-mount position that I was in, putting me at ease about getting my balls bitten. Now we just had to get the cuffs on the other hand, but that was the problem. David was barrel-chested and just getting his arms behind him was almost impossible. We had to use 3 sets of cuffs to connect them behind his back. The pepper spray now started to kick in, giving David superhuman strength. It took another 30 seconds of fighting before he finally released his arms and defeat, and we promised him that we would rinse his face off if he complied. My arms were cramping up and I remember thinking, I don't know how much longer I can fight this guy. When it was all over, we stood David up. The patio area was covered in blood. We walked out to the parking lot and called an ambulance to get him and myself checked out. I was still bleeding all over the place and was feeling lightheaded. We sat David down and I sat down next to him. Actually, I pretty much fell over but tried to hide it. My partner put a tourniquet above my elbow and raised my arm up on a nearby car, getting blood all over its white hood. I felt tingly all over and thought for a minute I was going to pass out, but I didn't. The paramedics got there and tended to David and myself and his girlfriend. They got his face cleaned off and the pepper gel had started to wear off. David looked at me and said, "We are blood brothers now." I laughed and thanked him for not biting my balls. He laughed and replied, "I tried to." The paramedics paused and looked at me and I winked. They didn't think it was funny and were not sharing in the trauma bond. The pepper gel that had been sprayed all over David's face and head while he was between my legs was still on my inner thigh and balls, and it felt like someone was cooking my groin. It felt like this for hours because I couldn't change my pants. David was transported and booked into Maricopa County Jail. Moral of the story: natives are some of the strongest people you will ever meet. That is all. Thank you for watching.
These stories are real-life accounts of real people. It's never our intention to promote violence. We are professionals and act as such in the field. We do actually care about the people we pick up and treat them with respect. The names of all people involved have been changed in order to keep their identity from the public and safeguard their privacy. Oftentimes, we are picking people up at their own family's request to either keep that family safe from that individual or to secure their collateral from being seized by the courts or the bondsman, things like homes and vehicles. Once again, we do not promote violence of any kind, and we do believe our world would benefit from more love being in it. So be respectful and always do your best to care for others. Thank you for watching. These stories are real-life accounts of real people. It's never our intention to promote violence. We are professionals and act as such in the field. We do actually care about the people we pick up and treat them with respect. The names of all people involved have been changed in order to keep their identity from the public and safeguard their privacy. Oftentimes, we are picking people up at their own family's request to either keep that family safe from that individual or to secure their collateral from being seized by the courts or the bondsman, things like homes and vehicles. Once again, we do not promote violence of any kind, and we do believe our world would benefit from more love being in it. So be respectful and always do your best to care for others. Thank you for watching.